The pounding started at exactly 6 in the morning, a hollow, authoritative rhythm that shook the drywall dust off my unfinished floors. When I opened the door, a deputy sheriff handed me a notice to vacate, his eyes sliding away from mine in shame. I expected a bank logo or a stranger's name on the filing. Instead, I saw the signatures of my own mother and father. They were not just visiting, they were evicting me. The pounding started at exactly 6 in the morning. It was not the tentative knock of a neighbor returning a wayward package or the polite rap of a canvasser. This was a heavy, authoritative rhythm that shook the drywall dust off the unfinished trim in my hallway. It vibrated in the floorboards beneath my bare feet. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My bedroom was still dark, the gray light of dawn just beginning to bleed through the sheer curtains I had hung only 3 days ago. For a moment, I thought perhaps something had happened to the house itself. I had spent the last 6 months renovating this place, a small, neglected Cape Cod on the edge of town that I had bought with every cent of my savings after the divorce. I knew every creak, every groan of the settling foundation, every pipe that rattled when the heat kicked on. But this noise was external. It was a demand. I pulled on my robe, cinching the belt tight, as if it could offer some kind of armor, and walked down the short hallway. The smell of sawdust and fresh paint was strong, a scent I had come to associate with freedom. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the heavy oak door. The morning air was damp and cold, biting at my ankles. Standing on my porch was a man in a tan uniform, his breath pluming in the chill. A badge glinted on his chest. Deputy Sheriff Nolan Bryce. I knew the name, though we had never met. In a town this size, you knew the names of the people who carried guns and the people who sat on the zoning board. "Good morning, Miss Rogers," he said. His voice was flat, professional, but his eyes refused to meet mine. They darted over my shoulder, looking into the living room where a stack of subway tiles sat waiting for the weekend. I pulled my robe tighter. "Can I help you, Deputy?" He reached into a leather portfolio tucked under his arm and produced a thick envelope. "I am sorry to wake you, ma'am. I have a service of process for you. It is an order of eviction and a notice to vacate." The words did not make sense. They sounded like a foreign language, something abstract and impossible. I blinked, looking from his face to the envelope. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice sounding incredibly small in the quiet street. "I own this house. I closed on it 6 months ago. I pay my mortgage to First National. I have the receipts." The deputy shifted his weight from one foot to the other. The leather of his belt creaked. "I am just the messenger. Ms. Rogers. The paperwork was filed yesterday with the county clerk. The order is immediate, but the judge granted a 48-hour grace period for removal of personal property. You have until 6 in the morning on Thursday. 48 hours. I took the envelope. It felt heavy, like it contained a stone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I ripped the top open right there on the porch. Ignoring the cold, I pulled out the top sheet. Superior Court of the County. Plaintiff, the Rogers Family Trust. Defendant, Caroline Rogers. Cause of action, unlawful detainer/unauthorized occupant, the Rogers Family Trust. The world tilted on its axis. The gray morning sky seemed to spin. I grabbed the doorframe to steady myself. "My parents?" I whispered. "This is from my parents?" Deputy Bryce took a half step back, as if he expected me to scream. He lowered his voice, leaning in slightly. "Look, Miss Rogers, I do not know the details, but I know who your father is, and I know how these things go. If I were you, I would not stand out here arguing with the paper." He tipped his head toward the street. I looked, 2 houses down. Mrs. Gable was standing by her mailbox, clutching her robe, watching us with the intensity of a hawk spotting a field mouse. Across the street, a curtain twitched and fell back into place. "Go inside," the deputy said, his voice dropping to a murmur that was almost kind. "Call legal aid. Call a lawyer. Do not let the neighbors see you cry." He touched the brim of his hat, turned on his heel, and walked back to his cruiser. I stood there, frozen, until his taillights disappeared around the curve of the asphalt. Then I stepped back inside and locked the door. I slid down the wood of the door until I hit the floor, the papers crinkling in my lap. I sat there for a long time, staring at the unfinished baseboards. I had sanded those by hand. I had chosen the stain. I had sweat and bled into this house to make it mine, to build a fortress where the chaos of my marriage could not touch me. And now, according to the document in my hand, I was a squatter. I forced myself to stand up. The nausea was rising in my throat, hot and sour. I walked to the kitchen island, a slab of butcher block I had oiled just last night, and spread the papers out. Complaint for possession. Paragraph 4. The defendant, Caroline Rogers, is an unauthorized occupant of the premises. Paragraph 6. The defendant is in breach of the family loan bridge agreement and has forfeited all rights to tenancy. I had never heard of a family loan bridge agreement. I grabbed my phone. My fingers were stiff, clumsy. I dialed the number I had known by heart since I was 6 years old. It rang 4 times. Hello? My mother's voice was calm. It was not the voice of a woman in crisis. It was the voice she used when she was ordering flowers for a charity luncheon or returning a pair of shoes that did not fit quite right. It was smooth, polished, and completely impenetrable. "Mom," I said. I was gasping for air. "A sheriff just left my porch. He gave me an eviction notice." There was a pause on the other end, a silence that felt heavy, curated. "Oh, Caroline," Elaine Rogers said, "I told your father this would be a shock. It is just a misunderstanding." "Sweetheart." "A misunderstanding?" I shouted. The control the deputy had warned me to keep shattering instantly. "You filed a lawsuit against me. It says I have 48 hours to get out of my own house. You and Dad are the plaintiffs." "Lower your voice," she said. Her tone hardened. Just a fraction. It was the warning tone she used to use in church when I fidgeted in the pew. "There is no need for histrionics. This is a complex financial matter. Your father and I have been trying to manage things, and unfortunately, paperwork had to be filed to protect the assets." "Assets? I am your daughter. This is my home. It is a structure, Caroline. And frankly, you have been over your head with it since you signed the deed. We are just trying to stop the bleeding." I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. "What are you talking about? I pay the mortgage. I have a job. I am fine. We cannot discuss this over the phone," she said, dismissing my reality with a sigh. "It is not appropriate. If you want to talk, come over to the house. We can sit down and talk like adults. But I will not have you screaming at me through a receiver while I am trying to have my tea." She hung up. I stared at the phone. The screen went black. Talk like adults. The phrase was a trap. In the Rogers household, talking like adults meant listening to Mark and Elaine Rogers explain why their version of the world was the only one that existed, and why my feelings were simply inconvenient errors in their logic. My phone buzzed in my hand. A text message. "Dad." I opened it. There was no greeting, no explanation, just 4 words. "Do not make this public." That message hit me harder than the eviction notice. It was not a plea. It was a command. It did not matter that they were throwing me onto the street. What mattered was that the neighbors in Winding Brook, their pristine, gated suburb, did not hear the crash. I looked at the clock on the stove. 7:15 in the morning. I had to go to work. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. My life was being dismantled by the 2 people who were supposed to be my safety net, but I still had to go manage supply chains at Alder Creek Logistics. I had to shower. I had to put on makeup. I had to pretend that I was a person with a future. I drove to the office on autopilot. The familiarity of the route was jarring. I passed the bakery where I bought my Friday morning bagel. The gas station where I filled up every Sunday. The world looked exactly the same as it had yesterday, but I was moving through it like a ghost. At my desk, the dual monitors hummed with spreadsheets, inventory counts, shipping manifests, driver schedules. I stared at the numbers, but they swam before my eyes. Every time the phone rang, I jumped. expecting it to be the deputy again, telling me the 48 hours had been cut to 24. Caroline? I looked up. My manager, David, was standing at the edge of my cubicle. He was a kind man, soft-spoken, with photos of his retrievers tacked to the fabric wall. He held a mug of coffee and looked concerned. "You have been staring at that same cell for 20 minutes, he said gently. "Is everything all right? You look pale." I could have told him. I could have said, "My parents are evicting me from the house I bought to heal from my divorce," but the shame was a physical weight in my chest. It felt like I had swallowed hot lead. To say it out loud was to make it real. To say it out loud was to admit that I came from people who would eat their young to save face. "I am fine," I stammered. I cleared my throat. "Actually, no. I am having a plumbing emergency. At the house, a pipe burst." David's face relaxed into sympathy. "Oh, that is a nightmare, especially with the renovations. Go handle it. We can cover the logistics meeting." "Thank you," I said. I grabbed my purse and walked out. I felt like a criminal. I had never left work early in 3 years. I was the reliable one, the one who stayed late, the one who fixed the errors other people made. Now, I was a liar. I did not go home. I drove to the county seat, a brick-and-mortar sprawling complex in the center of town. I found the legal aid office tucked into the basement of a building that smelled of floor wax and desperation. The waiting room was full. A mother with a crying toddler, an old man clutching a cane. I took a number and sat in a hard plastic chair, keeping my sunglasses on. I felt like an imposter. I had a salary. I drove a late-model sedan. I was not supposed to be here. When my number was called, I met with an intake coordinator named Sarah. She looked tired, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, but her eyes were sharp. She took the paperwork from me and spread it out on her desk. She read in silence for a long time. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed deafening. "Okay," she said finally, looking up. "This is not a standard landlord-tenant eviction." "What does that mean?" I asked. "Usually, if a landlord wants to evict you, they have to give you notice for cause, non-payment, lease violation. Then there is a hearing. Sarah tapped the paper with a pen. "This is a complaint for possession based on a title dispute. They are claiming you are not a tenant, but a guest who has overstayed. They are claiming the property belongs to a trust and that your occupancy is unauthorized. But I have the deed." I said. I pulled my phone out to show her the photo I kept of the closing day key handover. Sarah shook her head. "They have attached an exhibit here, a loan agreement. It says you transferred the beneficial interest in the home to the Rogers Family Trust 6 months ago in exchange for a bridge loan." I stared at her. "I never signed a loan. I used my own money. My grandmother left me an inheritance. I used that for the down payment." Sarah flipped to the back of the packet. "Look here." She pointed to a page I had missed in my panic on the kitchen floor. It was titled Addendum A, Bridge Financing and Title Transfer. At the bottom of the page was a signature. Caroline Marie Rogers. It was my name. It was the loop of the C I had practiced since high school. It was the sharp cross of the T. But as I leaned in, squinting under the fluorescent lights, I saw the hesitation in the ink, the slight tremor at the end of the S. "That is not my signature," I whispered. "It looks like it, but I did not sign this." Sarah sat back. "If that is true, then you are dealing with fraud. Forgery. But here is the problem, Ms. Rogers, in the eyes of the court. Right now, this document is valid because it is notarized. See the stamp?" I looked. State of Ohio. Commission expires 2028. This moves the case out of housing court and into civil litigation, Sarah explained. But the possession order is the immediate threat. They are using a loophole that treats you like a trespasser rather than a homeowner. It is aggressive. It is designed to get you out fast before you can argue the merits of the ownership. What do I do? "You need a private attorney," Sarah said, "one who specializes in real estate fraud. Legal aid can help with the stay of eviction, but we cannot fight a trust lawsuit. You need to file an emergency motion to stay the writ of possession. You need to tell the judge the signature is forged, and you need to do it today." I left the office with a list of names and a stomach full of acid. I drove home. The house looked different now. It did not look like my sanctuary. It looked like a trap. I unlocked the door and went straight to the guest room, where I kept my filing box. I dumped the contents onto the bed, closing documents, title insurance, the deed. I went through every single page. I was looking for the addendum Sarah had shown me. I needed to know if I had somehow missed it, if I had blindly signed a stack of papers at the closing table like a fool. I found the original purchase agreement. I found the mortgage note. I found the transfer tax receipt. There was no addendum. There was no bridge agreement. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the valid papers in my lap. My parents had not just sued me. They had manufactured a reality. They had taken my identity, my name, my signature, and used it to construct a legal weapon. Why? The question looped in my mind. We had issues. My mother was controlling. My father was distant. They had hated the divorce, claiming it made the family look unstable. But this was nuclear. This was an attempt to destroy me. The sun began to set, casting long, bruised shadows across the room. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the gloom, listening to the house settle. A knock at the door made me jump. It was lighter than the deputy's pounding, tentative. I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. It was Tessa, my neighbor from across the street. She was a retired schoolteacher with a garden that put the rest of the block to shame. I opened the door. "Hi, Tessa," I said. I tried to smile, but my face felt like a mask that was slipping. "Caroline, honey," Tessa said. She was clutching a Tupperware container. "I made lasagna. I saw the police car this morning. I didn't want to pry, but, the neighborhood talks. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." I took the warm container. It smelled like oregano and comfort. "Thank you. Tessa, it's a misunderstanding." She nodded, her eyes searching mine. She hesitated, then stepped a little closer. I wasn't going to say anything because I thought maybe you had hired someone, but seeing the police made me wonder. What is it? About a week ago? Last Tuesday? I think I was out deadheading the roses. There was a car parked right in front of your driveway, a black sedan. A man was out there taking pictures of the house. I frowned. The appraiser came months ago. "He wasn't an appraiser," Tessa said. "He didn't come to the door. He was just snapping photos from the street, taking notes on a clipboard." "What did he look like? Tall? Expensive suit?" "Slicked back hair, and the car. It had a logo on the side. Small, gold letters. I have seen it on those flyers that come in the mail. You know the ones? 'We buy homes for cash. Kessler Redevelopment.'" I said. The name floated up from the pile of junk mail I usually threw directly into the recycling bin. "That is the one," Tessa said. "I just thought it was odd. He looked like he was shopping. Caroline, like he was sizing the place up." A cold chill went down my spine. "Thanks, Tessa," I said. "I really appreciate it." I closed the door and locked it. I leaned against the wood, the warm lasagna burning my hands. Kessler Redevelopment, a cash for homes predatory outfit. I went to the kitchen and grabbed the stack of mail from the counter. I sifted through it until I found the glossy postcard. Kessler Redevelopment Group, fast cash, no questions asked. There was a logo in the corner, a stylized gold key. I closed my eyes. My parents were not just evicting me, they were selling me out. I went to my bedroom and lay down on top of the covers. I did not undress. I stared at the ceiling fan, watching the blades cut through the dark air. I did the math in my head. If I lost the house, I lost the equity. I lost my credit score. An eviction would tank it. I would lose my clearance at work if my finances showed instability. I would lose the reputation I had built as the calm, capable Rogers' daughter who survived a divorce without a hair out of place. I would be 33 years old, homeless, and branded a financial failure. But as I lay there, listening to the wind rattle the loose pane in the window, I realized the fear was deeper than poverty. I could survive being poor. I had done it before, in college, eating ramen and working double shifts. This was different. My parents had filed that paperwork knowing exactly what it would do to me. They had forged my signature. They had lied to a judge. They had sent a sheriff to my door at dawn. They believed, with total, arrogant certainty, that they could rewrite my life because they had created it. They believed I was not a person, but an extension of their will, and if I didn't fit the narrative they needed, they would edit me out. I curled into a ball, pulling the duvet up to my chin. The tears finally came, hot and silent, sliding into my ears. They wanted a fight? They had no idea what they had just started. I watched the digital clock on my nightstand flip from 11:59 to 12 o'clock. 42 hours left. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I plotted. The drive to Winding Brook took 45 minutes, and every mile felt like a regression. I watched the scenery change from the eclectic, slightly worn streets of my neighborhood to the manicured, sterile perfection of the suburbs where I grew up. Winding Brook was a place where the grass was regulated by homeowners association bylaws to be exactly 2.5 inches high, and where garbage cans were never seen, only sensed on Tuesday mornings. I pulled my sedan into the driveway of the house on Sycamore Lane. It was a colonial revival, brick and imposing, with black shutters that had been freshly painted. It looked exactly as it had when I was 16 and sneaking out the back window. It looked like a fortress of respectability. My stomach turned over. I had the eviction notice tucked into my purse, folded inside a stiff manila folder. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. The dark circles under my eyes were visible even through my concealer. I took a breath, smoothed my hair, and stepped out of the car. I did not knock. I used my key, the brass one I had carried on my ring since college. It turned in the lock with a familiar heavy click. "Mom? Dad?" I called out. The house smelled of lemon polish and potpourri, a scent that instantly made my throat tighten. "In here, Caroline." My mother's voice floated from the sunroom. I walked through the foyer, past the formal dining room with its table set for a dinner that never happened, and into the back of the house. Elaine Rogers was sitting in her wicker armchair, a book open on her lap. She was wearing a cashmere cardigan and pearls, looking for all the world like a woman who had not just sent a sheriff to destroy her daughter's life. There was a silver tea service on the low glass table. 2 cups. She had been expecting me. "Sit down, darling," she said, gesturing to the cushion opposite her. "The kettle has just boiled. I made Earl Grey. I know that is your favorite." I did not sit. I stood in the doorway, my hand gripping the strap of my purse. "I do not want tea." "Mom," I said, "I want to know why a deputy sheriff was on my porch at 6 o'clock this morning telling me I have 48 hours to vacate my home." Elaine sighed. A small, disappointed sound, as if I had used the wrong fork at a salad course. She closed her book and placed it gently on the table. "Please do not stand there hovering. Caroline, it makes me nervous. Sit down." I stayed standing. "Where is Dad?" "He is in the study. He will be out in a moment." I walked over to the table and dropped the manila folder onto the glass. It landed with a slap that made the teacups rattle. "This is not a social call," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, though my blood was boiling. "This is a legal threat. You filed a lawsuit against me. You claimed I am a squatter in my own house." Elaine poured the tea. The stream of amber liquid was perfectly steady. Her hands were not shaking. Mine were. "It is a formality," she said softly. "We needed to secure the asset. You know how volatile the market is right now." "The asset?" I repeated. "It is my home. I bought it. I renovated it. I live there." "And who helped you get there?" she asked, looking up at me finally. Her eyes were blue and cool, unclouded by any guilt. "We have supported you through everything. Caroline, the divorce, the move. We are just trying to make sure that the family resources are protected." I felt like I was speaking a different language before I could respond. The heavy oak door of the study opened, and my father walked in. Mark Rogers was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with silver hair that was always perfectly coiffed. He wore a crisp button-down shirt and slacks. Even on a Tuesday at home, he looked at me, then at the folder on the table, and then away, out the window toward the garden. "Hello? Caroline?" he said. "Dad," I said, turning to him. "Tell me this is a mistake. Tell me you did not tell a judge that I am an unauthorized occupant." Mark rubbed the back of his neck. He looked tired, older than I remembered seeing him last month. The skin around his jaw was slack. "It is not a mistake," he said, his voice rough. "It is a necessary step." "Necessary for what?" I demanded. "To make me homeless? To protect the family?" He snapped, his eyes snapping back to mine with a flash of anger. "You have no idea the pressure we are under. That house. It was always meant to stay in the family. It is part of the portfolio." I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "What portfolio?" "I bought it from the seller directly. The deed is in my name." Mark exchanged a look with Elaine. It was a quick, silent communication that spoke of years of secrets. "Caroline," Elaine said, her voice dripping with reasonable sweetness, "you are confused, and that is understandable. You have been under so much stress lately. The divorce took such a toll on you. We all saw it. You were not yourself for a long time." I stiffened. "Do not do that. Do not make this about my mental health." "I am perfectly fine." "Are you?" Elaine asked. She reached down beside her chair and picked up a thick navy blue folder. "Because if you were fine, you would remember signing the agreement." She opened the folder and slid a document across the table toward me. I looked down. It was a high-quality photocopy on heavy bond paper. The header read, "Family Loan and Asset Management Agreement." I scanned the text. It detailed a complex arrangement where the Rogers Family Trust, an entity I had never heard of until this morning, had provided the funds for the purchase of my home. And in exchange, I had assigned the title to the trust, retaining only a revocable license to occupy the premises, and there, at the bottom of the last page, was the signature, Caroline Marie Rogers. It was the same forgery I had seen in my mind's eye when the legal aid coordinator described it, but seeing it here, in my parents' sunroom, made the air leave my lungs. "I did not sign this," I said. Elaine tilted her head. "Oh, honey, of course you did. It was right here, at this table. Last August. You were crying about the closing costs, remember? You were so overwhelmed. Mark told you we would handle it, and you signed the papers so we could wire the funds." I stared at her. I felt a wave of dizziness. She was lying with such absolute conviction that for a split second, I questioned my own memory. Had I been that stressed? Had I signed something without reading it? No. I remembered the closing. I remembered the wire transfer coming from my own savings account, the money from Nana's inheritance. I had the receipt. "You are lying," I said. My voice was shaking. "I used Nana's money. I did not need your help." Elaine's face hardened. She looked at Mark. "See?" she said to him. "She is rewriting history again, just like with Richard. The mention of my ex-husband was a calculated strike. They knew the divorce had shattered my confidence. They were using the cracks in my foundation to plant new doubts. I realized then what they were doing. They were not just stealing my house. They were stealing my credibility. If I fought them, they would paint me as the unstable, emotional divorcee who took money from her parents and then hallucinated that she was independent. I forced myself to take a deep breath. I unclenched my hands. I needed to be cold. I needed to be a rock. "I want a copy of this," I said, pointing to the document. "No," Mark said quickly. He stepped forward and put his hand on the folder. "You can look at it here. We are not having you take this to some cheap lawyer who will twist the language." I looked at my father. He was sweating, a thin sheen of perspiration on his upper lip. "If you do not give me a copy," I said, articulating every syllable, "I will have my attorney subpoena the original, and I will have a forensic handwriting analyst examine the ink and the pressure. And when they prove that I did not sign that, I will file criminal charges for fraud." The room went dead silent. The clock on the mantel ticked loudly. Mark looked at Elaine. She gave a microscopic nod. Mark pulled a photocopy from the back of the folder and thrust it at me. "Fine. Take it. Show it to whoever you want. It is a valid contract. You owe us. Caroline. For college. For the wedding. for everything we have done to prop you up." I took the paper. I did not say thank you. I turned around and walked out of the sunroom, down the hall, and out the front door. I did not look back. I got into my car and locked the doors. My hands were trembling so badly I could not get the key into the ignition. I sat there for a full minute, breathing in the smell of old leather and trying to stop the world from spinning. They were gaslighting me. They were rewriting my life to cover their debts. I started the car and drove out of Winding Brook. I needed to hear a voice that was not lying to me. I pulled into a gas station parking lot 5 miles down the road and put the car in park. I pulled out my phone and found the number for the title company that had handled my closing. Lakeside Title Escrow. I hit dial. Lakeside Title. "This is Jennifer." "Hi," I said. "My name is Caroline Rogers. I closed on a property at 424 Elm Street last August. File number 88204. "One moment. Ms. Rogers." I heard typing in the background. "Okay, I have the file. How can I help you?" "I need to check something." I said, "Is there any record in your file of a secondary lien or a trust transfer to the Rogers Family Trust?" There was a pause, a long pause. "Ms. Rogers." The voice on the other line changed. It lost its customer service brightness and became guarded. "I see a note here regarding a post-closing inquiry about a trust." "What kind of inquiry?" I asked. "I cannot really discuss the details over the phone." Jennifer said, "Privacy regulations." I took a breath. "Jennifer, listen to me. I have an eviction notice in my hand based on a document I never signed. I believe someone forged my signature and submitted paperwork to your office or the county recorder after the closing. I need to know if that trust is legitimate." The silence on the other end was heavy. "Ms. Rogers," Jennifer said slowly, "if you are alleging forgery, that is a legal matter. I have to lock this file immediately and refer you to our legal department. I cannot answer any more questions." "Wait," I started. "Please have your attorney contact us." The line went dead. I lowered the phone. They knew something. The sudden shutdown confirmed it. If the file was clean, she would have just said no. Locking the file meant there was a red flag. I drove back toward the city, my mind racing. I needed an ally. I could not go back to work. My face was a wreck, and my focus was shot. I texted Maya. "Emergency. Can you meet me?" Maya replied instantly. "Coffee shop on 4th. 10 minutes. Maya was my lifeline at Alder Creek Logistics. She was 5 years older than me, tough as nails, and had zero patience for nonsense. She was the one who had dragged me out for margaritas the day my divorce was final and told me to stop apologizing for existing. I walked into the coffee shop and saw her in a back booth. She took one look at me and pushed a latte across the table. "You look like hell," she said. "Drink, then talk." I told her everything. The deputy, the visit to Winding Brook, the forgery, the gaslighting. Maya listened without interrupting. She watched my face, her eyes narrowing as the story went on. When I finished, she sat back and crossed her arms. "Okay," she said. "This is not a family spat. Caroline, this is a hit." "A hit?" She tapped the table. "Think about it. If they just wanted money, they would have asked. If they wanted you to sell the house to pay them back, they would have guilt-tripped you into listing it. They did not do that. They filed an eviction, an ex parte eviction. From the sound of it, that is designed to do 2 things: move fast and humiliate you." "Why humiliate me?" I asked. "That is the part I do not understand," Dad said. "Do not make this public, because humiliation makes you compliant." Maya said, "If you are ashamed, you hide. You do not ask questions. You do not go to the police. You just pack your boxes and disappear because you do not want anyone to know your parents kicked you out. They are banking on your pride. Caroline, they are using your dignity as a weapon against you." I stirred my coffee, watching the foam swirl. She was right. That was exactly what Mark had texted. "Don't make this public." He wanted me to go quietly. "You need to document everything." Maya said, "Every text, every voicemail. Write down the conversation you just had with them while it is fresh. And you need to look at those court papers again. If they forged a signature, They probably cut corners elsewhere. Criminals always get lazy with the paperwork because they think no one will check. I nodded. I pulled the photocopy Mark had given me out of my purse. Let's look now, I said. We spent the next hour dissecting the documents. Maya had an eye for detail. She managed complex shipping manifests for a living. Here, she said, pointing to the bottom of the second page of the court filing. Look at the exhibit list. Exhibit A is the deed. Exhibit B is the loan agreement. Where is Exhibit C? I looked. The text referred to Exhibit C, Schedule of Default. But there was no Exhibit C attached. It skipped straight to an affidavit of service. And look at the notary stamp on the loan agreement, Maya said. She held it up to the light. It is blurry, like it was copied from another document and pasted on. See the pixelation around the edges? The rest of the text is sharp. The stamp is fuzzy. I squinted. She was right. It was subtle. But it was there. That is a digital paste job, Maya said. I see that on fake invoices sometimes. Someone scanned a valid stamp and dropped it onto this Word document. I felt a cold anger settling in my chest, displacing the panic. This was sloppy. It was arrogant. I need to see the original filing. I said, I need to see what is in the court file. Go to the clerk, Maya said. Make them show you the wet ink. I left the coffee shop with a new sense of purpose. I was not just a victim anymore. I was an investigator. The county courthouse was a monolith of gray stone, designed to make you feel small. I went through the metal detectors, my heels clicking loudly on the terrazzo floors. I found the civil clerk's office and waited in line. When it was my turn, I gave the clerk the case number. I am the defendant. I said, I want to view the case file. The clerk, a woman with reading glasses on a chain, tapped into her computer. She frowned. I can show you the complaint and the summons, she said, but the exhibits are under seal. Under seal? I asked. Why? This is an eviction case. She looked at the screen again. There is a motion to seal granted yesterday. Financial privacy. That is ridiculous, I said, my voice rising. It is my financial privacy. I am the defendant. Surely I have a right to see the evidence against me. You will have to file a motion to unseal. The clerk said, her face blank, or your attorney can request access, but I cannot show you the sealed exhibits at the counter. I felt the wall go up. It was invisible, but it was solid. The system was protecting the paper, not the person. I turned away from the counter, frustration burning in my throat. Why would they seal Exhibit C? What was in the schedule of default that they did not want the public, or me, to see? I walked out of the office and down the wide marble steps toward the exit. The afternoon sun was slanting through the high windows, creating pools of light on the floor. As I pushed through the heavy revolving doors and stepped out onto the plaza, I stopped, standing near the fountain, about 20 feet away. Were two men. One was short, balding, wearing a cheap gray suit. I recognized him vaguely. He was a clerk I had seen working in the land records office before. The other man was tall. He wore a navy suit that looked like it cost more than my car. His hair was slicked back. He was checking his watch. It was the man from the mailer, the man Tessa had seen photographing my house. Graham Kessler. I froze. I watched as the clerk handed Kessler a thick envelope. Kessler didn't look at it. He just slid it into his inner jacket pocket. He said something, laughed, and clapped the clerk on the shoulder. It was a gesture of familiarity, of ownership. Then, as if he felt my gaze, Kessler turned. He looked right at me. He did not look surprised. He did not look guilty. A slow smile spread across his face. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who sees a rabbit frozen in the grass. He nodded to me, a single, mocking inclination of his head. Then he turned and walked toward a black luxury sedan parked in the loading zone. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. He knew who I was. He was here, at the courthouse, meeting with county employees. My parents were not just working with a predatory lender. They were part of a machine that had people on the inside. I walked to my car. Constantly checking over my shoulder, I felt exposed. The city felt different now. It wasn't a collection of streets and buildings. It was a game board. And I was a pawn that was about to be sacrificed. I drove home, taking a different route, watching the rearview mirror for black sedans. When I got inside, I locked the deadbolt, the chain, and jammed a chair under the handle. It was irrational, but I didn't care. The house was silent. The sun had gone down, and the unfinished rooms were full of shadows. I walked into the kitchen and saw the light blinking on my landline, a relic I had kept for emergencies. One new message. I pressed play. Caroline. It was my mother's voice. She sounded different than she had this afternoon. Her voice was thick, weepy. Please, honey, please do not make us look bad. You know what your father's blood pressure is like. The doctor said he is a stroke risk. If you drag this out, if you cause a scene, I do not know if he can take it. Just sign the agreement. We can work this out as a family. Don't kill your father over a house. The machine beeped. I stood there in the dark kitchen. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. It was a reflex, trained into me over 3 decades. Protect Dad. Don't upset Dad. Dad is fragile. But then I remembered the look on Graham Kessler's face. I remembered the forged signature. I remembered the deputy at 6 a.m. They were using his health as a hostage. If I fought, I was the bad daughter who gave her father a stroke. If I surrendered, I was the homeless daughter who lost everything. I looked at the phone. No. I whispered to the empty room. I was not going to play their game anymore. I was not going to be the good daughter. I walked to the drawer where I kept my tools. I took out a hammer. I was not sure why, but the weight of it in my hand felt good, solid, real. I was going to need something stronger than a hammer. I was going to need to burn their narrative to the ground. I sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out a legal pad. I wrote down the date. I wrote down the time. I wrote down Event 1, the threat. I was documenting everything, and I was going to find out what was in Exhibit C, even if I had to tear the courthouse apart brick by brick. Dana Mercer's office was not in the glass and steel downtown towers where the corporate firms lived. It was on the 2nd floor of a converted brick row house in a neighborhood that was just starting to gentrify. The sign on the door was small, frosted glass with black lettering. Mercer Law, P.L.L.C. I walked in 10 minutes early. The reception area was piled high with file boxes, and the air smelled of stale coffee and old paper. A woman with a messy bun and a sharp, angular face stuck her head out of an inner office. "You must be Caroline," she said. "I am Dana. We do not stand on ceremony here. Come on back." I followed her. Her office was a chaos of organized clutter, but her eyes were laser-focused. I sat down and told her everything. I showed her the eviction notice, the forged signature, and the notes I had taken after my conversation with my parents. I told her about Graham Kessler and the sealed exhibit. Dana listened without taking a single note. She just watched me, tapping a yellow pencil against her chin. When I finished, she leaned forward. "Okay," she said. Her voice was raspy, like she spent too much time arguing. "Here is the reality. We are bleeding. You have an eviction order that matures in less than 36 hours. If we do not stop that, nothing else matters. You will be on the street, and fighting from a motel room is 100 times harder than fighting from your living room." "What do we do?" I asked. "We file an emergency motion to stay the writ of possession." Dana said, "We allege fraud on the court. We tell the judge that the document serving as the basis for the eviction is a forgery. That will buy us a pause, maybe a week, maybe 10 days, and then we go to war." Dana said flatly. "We attack the chain of title. We attack the notary. We attack the trust itself. But right now, I need a retainer. $5,000. I swallowed hard. That was a significant chunk of my emergency fund. But I thought about the man with the gold key logo smiling at me outside the courthouse. I wrote the check. My hand shook as I signed it. My real signature, not the shaky forgery on the loan agreement. Dana took the check and snapped her fingers. "Good. Go home. Do not answer your phone. Do not talk to your parents. If the sheriff comes back, Do not open the door unless he has a warrant or a new court order. I am going to the courthouse now. I went home and waited. The hours dragged by like days. I paced the length of my unfinished living room, counting the steps, 12 paces from the window to the hallway, 12 paces of ownership that felt more fragile with every second. At 4 p.m, my phone rang. It was Dana. We got it, she said. I let out a breath. I felt like I had been holding since dawn. The judge granted a temporary stay. She continued. He was not happy about the allegation of forgery. He has set a show cause hearing for next Tuesday. That gives us 6 days. 6 days, I repeated. It felt like a lifetime. Do not get comfortable, Dana warned. Your parents will know about this within the hour. They are going to escalate. They tried the legal hammer, and we blocked it. Now they will try the emotional one. Stay strong. Caroline. She was right. The emotional hammer arrived at 10 the next morning. I was in the kitchen, trying to force myself to eat a piece of toast. When a car pulled into the driveway, it was not the sheriff. It was my mother's silver Lexus. I froze. Dana had said, do not talk to them. But seeing my mother's car in my driveway triggered a reflex so deep it was almost biological. I watched from behind the curtain as Elaine got out. She was wearing a soft blue coat, carrying a white bakery box tied with a ribbon. She looked harmless. She looked like a mother visiting her daughter. She walked to the door and knocked. Not the pounding of the deputy, but a gentle, rhythmic rap. Caroline? She called out. Her voice was muffled by the glass. Caroline, I know you are home. I saw your car. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, paralyzed. Honey, please, she said. I brought those almond croissants you like, from the French bakery. I just want to see you. I just want to make sure you are eating. My stomach twisted. The almond croissants. It was a specific, targeted kindness. She knew I loved them. She was weaponizing my favorite comfort food. Caroline, open the door, she said, her voice cracking slightly. I am your mother. This is ridiculous. We can't talk through a door. I walked to the door. I did not unlock it. I spoke through the wood. Go away. Mom. There was a silence on the porch. Then a soft sob. How can you be so cruel? She asked. We are trying to help you. We are trying to save you from yourself, and you are treating us like enemies. You sued me, I said, leaning my forehead against the cold door. You forged my signature. That is not help. You do not understand the pressure we are under, she cried out, her voice rising. We are all going to sink if you do not stop this nonsense. Just let me in. Let me explain. I wanted to open the door. Every instinct I had as a daughter screamed at me to open the door, to hug her, to tell her it was okay, to fix the crack in her voice. That was my role. I was the fixer. I was the steady one. But then I looked at the eviction notice still sitting on my counter. If I opened that door, I was letting in the person who filed that paperwork. I am not opening the door, I said firmly. Talk to my lawyer. Fine, she snapped. The sadness evaporated instantly, replaced by a flash of the steel I knew lay beneath the cashmere. You are making a huge mistake. Caroline, when you are left with nothing, do not come crying to us. I heard her heels click angrily on the concrete. I heard the car door slam. I heard the engine rev and fade away. I sank to the floor and put my head in my hands. I felt monstrous. I felt cruel. But then I repeated the words Dana had told me. Boundaries aren't cruelty. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my father. We can fix this if you sign the settlement. Check your email. I forwarded the email immediately to Dana without opening it. 5 minutes later, she called me. Do not sign this. Dana said. Her voice was hard. What does it say? It is a settlement agreement, she explained. It stipulates that you agree to the validity of the family loan bridge agreement. It transfers the deed of the house fully to the Rogers Family Trust. And then, this is the kicker, it offers you a lease. A lease? I asked. A 2-year lease, Dana said. You would pay market rent to the trust. Essentially, Caroline. They want you to donate your equity to them, and then pay them monthly for the privilege of living in the house you already bought. You would be paying for your own house forever. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was not a settlement. It was a harvest. They wanted to harvest my financial life to feed the trust. Why? I asked. Why do they need the house and the trust so badly? That is the million-dollar question, Dana said, and we are going to find out. I need you to think. Caroline, go back to the closing. The money. You said you used an inheritance? Yes, I said. My grandmother left me $50,000 when she passed. It was in a separate account. Did your parents know about it? Yes. I paused. A memory surfacing. They actually encouraged me to use it. They kept saying, "You should put that money into a home. It is a safe investment." Did they offer to help? They offered a gift. I said, $10,000. For closing costs. They insisted. They said it was tradition. Did you need it? No, I said slowly. I had enough, but they were so pushy about it. Dad said, "Let us do this for you. It makes us feel good." So I took the check. Dana hummed, and that check, that $10,000, that creates the paper trail. It gives them a hook. If they can claim that $10,000 was part of a larger loan structure, they muddy the waters of ownership. They bought a stake in your house for $10,000 without you realizing it. I felt sick. The gift was a Trojan horse. I need you to dig into the notary, Dana said. The name on the forged addendum is Linda Halloway. Her commission is registered to a shipping and printing store on Elm Street. Pack and Go. I know that place, I said. It is near the mall. Go there, Dana said. See if Linda works there. See if you can get anyone to talk. But be careful. I grabbed my purse and keys. I needed to do something. Sitting in the house was making me crazy. The Pack and Go was a narrow storefront sandwiched between a vape shop and a nail salon. Inside, it smelled of cardboard and packing tape. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A young guy with gauges in his ears was leaning on the counter, scrolling on his phone. "Can I help you?" he asked without looking up. "Hi," I said. "I am looking for a notary. Is Linda Halloway in today?" The guy looked up. He frowned. "Linda? She has not worked here in like 6 months. Oh," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "That is a shame. She notarized a document for me a while back, and I needed to ask her a question. Do you know where she went?" "No idea." The guy said, "She got fired." "Fired? Why?" The guy looked around, then leaned in, lowering his voice. "Look, I probably should not say, but the owner found out she was stamping stuff she should not have. Like, people would come in without the person signing, and she would just stamp it for $20. My heart began to hammer. Robo-notary. Did a man ever come in?" I asked. "Older guy? Or maybe a guy in a suit?" The kid shrugged. "Lots of people come in, but there was this one guy. Came in a few times. Real slick. Had a whole stack of papers, like inches thick. He would slip Linda an envelope, and she would spend her lunch break just stamping. Bam, bam, bam. I felt a chill go through me. Industrial scale fraud. "Did he drive a black car?" I asked. "Yeah," the kid said. "A big sedan, parked in the fire lane. I remember because the boss yelled at him once." "Thank you," I said. I backed out of the store, my legs feeling like jelly. It was not just my parents. My parents were just one file in a stack of papers that Graham Kessler had processed through a compromised notary. I got back in my car and called Dana. Linda Halloway was fired for stamping documents without signers present. I said, and a man matching Kessler's description used to bring her stacks of documents. "That is it," Dana said. Her voice was fierce. "That is the leverage. If we can prove a pattern of fraud with the notary, we can invalidate the entire document. Not just your signature. I am going to hire a private investigator to track down Linda." I hung up and drove home. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawns of my neighborhood. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw Tessa kneeling in her garden, pulling weeds. She waved. I walked over. I needed human contact that was not adversarial. "Hey, Tessa," I said. "Hey, sweetie," she said. She stood up. wiping dirt on her jeans. Everything okay? I saw your mom earlier. She seemed upset. She was. I said, "It is complicated." Tessa nodded. She looked at me closely. You know, I remembered something else. After you told me about the car with the logo. What? The charity gala. She said, the one for the children's hospital back in November. I was volunteering at the check-in table. Your parents were there. They go every year. I said, well, I saw them talking to that man. The one from the car. Graham Kessler. You did? Yeah, Tessa said. They were in the lobby. Your mom was laughing. She was holding his arm. You know, in that friendly way. I heard her say, "You are so helpful with real estate. Graham, I do not know what we would do without you." I stared at her. November. That was 3 months after I bought the house. That was when I was happily picking out paint colors, thinking my life was stable. Are you sure? I asked. Positive, Tessa said. It stuck in my mind because he looks so slippery. And your parents are usually so careful about who they are seen with. Thank you. Tessa, I said. I went inside and sat in the dark. November. My parents had not just stumbled into this. They had been cultivating Graham Kessler for months. My phone pinged. An email from Dana. Subject, preliminary asset search. I opened it. Attached was a PDF. Caroline, look at this. I ran a search on your parents' names and cross-referenced with Kessler's known entities. I scrolled through the document. It was a dense list of filings and liens, and there, highlighted in yellow, was a UCC financing statement. Debtor, Mark and Elaine Rogers. Secured party, KRG Holdings, LLC, Kessler Redevelopment Group. Collateral, all assets, present and future, including but not limited to. And there was a list of properties, their house in Winding Brook, a vacation condo in Florida, and my address, 424 Elm Street. But there was something else. The loan amount. Principal, $400,000. Interest rate, 12%. Compounding monthly. Maturity. Date, February 1st. I looked at the date on my phone. February 3rd. The loan had matured 2 days ago. I dropped the phone on the table. The pieces slammed together in my mind. My parents were broke, or close to it. They had borrowed nearly $500,000 from a predatory lender at loan shark rates. They had put up everything they owned as collateral, but it wasn't enough. So they had listed my house, my equity, my safe haven, as part of their assets. They had forged the bridge agreement to make it look like they owned my house, so they could use it to secure their own loan. And now the loan was due. They couldn't pay, so Kessler was calling in the collateral. The eviction wasn't about punishing me, it was about liquidation. They needed to hand my house over to Kessler to satisfy their debt. The settlement where I rented it back? That was just a way to generate cash flow to pay the interest. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. I understood now. The desperation, the rehearsed calm, the sudden aggression. They were drowning. They were terrified. They were trying to plug a hole in their sinking ship with the planks of my life. For a second, a sharp pang of sympathy cut through me. My father, with his pride. My mother, with her image. They must be living in absolute terror of being exposed as failures. But then I remembered the deputy at 6 a.m. I remembered the look on Graham Kessler's face, the smile of a man who knows he has already won. I remembered my mother standing on my porch with pastries, trying to manipulate her way inside so she could sell me out to a shark. They were drowning. Yes, but they had decided that the only way to save themselves was to hold my head under the water. They chose to aim the law at me at dawn. I turned away from the window. The sympathy died, cold and hard in my chest. I was not going to be their life raft. I picked up my phone and called Dana. I know why they are doing it, I said. They owe Kessler money. The loan just matured. My house is the collateral. Dana swore softly. Cross-collateralization. They pledged assets they did not own. That is fraud. Caroline, that is bank fraud. I know. I said, if we prove this, Dana said. Your parents could go to prison. The silence stretched between us. Prison. My father, in an orange jumpsuit. My mother, without her pearls. The house in Winding Brook, seized and sold. The family name, destroyed. It was everything they feared. It was everything they had raised me to prevent. Do it, I said. Are you sure? Dana asked gently. Once we file this counterclaim, there is no going back. I looked around my house, my unfinished floors, my stack of tiles, my sanctuary. They forged my signature. I said, they tried to make me homeless to cover their bad bet. I am sure. Burn it down. Okay, Dana said. I will start drafting the counterclaim. We file in the morning. I hung up. I stood in the quiet of my home. I was alone. I had no parents. Not really. I had adversaries who shared my DNA. I went to the kitchen and threw the box of almond croissants into the trash. Then I went to the closet and pulled out a can of paint. I had work to do. I painted the trim in the hallway until 3 a.m, the smell of latex and purpose filling the air. I covered the scuffs and the imperfections. I made the lines sharp and clean. This was my house, and I was going to keep it. The hallway of the county courthouse was lined with benches that had been polished by the shifting weight of anxious people. I sat on one of them, my knees pressed together, watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of light falling from the high, dirty windows. It was Tuesday. The hearing was scheduled for 9 o'clock. I felt watched. It was a prickling sensation at the back of my neck, primal and undeniable. Every time a door opened or a bailiff walked by, my muscles tensed. I was not just a defendant anymore. I was a target. Dana Mercer sat next to me, reviewing her file. She looked calm, a predator resting before the hunt. She wore a charcoal suit that looked sharp enough to cut glass. Stay focused, she murmured without looking up. Do not look at them when they walk in. Do not let them see you react. I nodded, but my eyes drifted. Down the corridor, near the water fountain, I saw 2 men in expensive suits. One was the attorney representing the Rogers Family Trust, my parents' hired gun. A man named Sterling. The other was an associate I did not recognize. They were speaking in hushed tones, but the acoustics of the marble hallway carried their voices. Expedited possession is the priority, Sterling was saying. He checked his watch. We need the writ issued by Friday. The client has a liquidity event tied to the property transfer. The occupant is just a minor obstacle. The occupant, a minor obstacle. I felt the air leave my lungs. I was not a daughter. I was not a homeowner. I was debris in the road, something to be swept aside so the real business could proceed. A liquidity event, that was corporate speak for selling me out to pay off a debt. Dana touched my arm. I looked at her. Did you hear that? I whispered. I heard it, she said. Her eyes were hard, and we are going to make them choke on it. The bailiff opened the double doors. All rise. We walked into the courtroom. It was smaller than I expected, smelling of wood polish and stale anxiety. My parents were there. They sat at the plaintiff's table, looking stiff and uncomfortable. My mother wore a navy dress that made her look frail. My father stared straight ahead at the judge's empty chair, his jaw set in a rigid line. They did not look at me. Judge Alvarez took the bench. He was a heavy-set man with a face that had seen too many lies to be easily impressed. He put on his reading glasses and opened the file. We are here on the plaintiff's motion for immediate possession and the defendant's emergency motion to stay, the judge said. His voice was gravelly. Ms. Mercer, I have read your filing regarding the alleged forgery. That is a serious accusation. It is a serious reality, Your Honor. Dana stood up. She did not use a podium. She stood next to me, her hand resting on the table near mine. The plaintiff is attempting to use a summary eviction proceeding to enforce a fraudulent transfer of title. My client, Caroline Rogers, is the legal owner of the property. She holds the deed. The document the plaintiff is relying on, this so-called bridge agreement, is a fabrication. Mr. Sterling stood up. He was smooth, polished, the kind of lawyer who charged by the minute. Your Honor, this is a standard family dispute. The defendant is the daughter of the trustees. She signed the agreement to secure funding for the home. Now that she has defaulted, she is raising these desperate claims to delay the inevitable. We simply ask for possession so the trust can secure the asset. Dana shot back instantly. There is no default because there was no loan. And there is no loan because the signature is a forgery. And, Your Honor, we believe the plaintiff is concealing the true nature of this transaction. The court file contains a sealed exhibit, Exhibit C, which the plaintiff claims is confidential financial information. We argue that this exhibit is material to the case. You cannot evict a homeowner based on evidence she is not allowed to see. The judge looked at Sterling. Why is Exhibit C sealed? Counselor? It contains sensitive proprietary information regarding the trust's broader investment strategy. Sterling said smoothly, It is not relevant to the occupancy issue. Judge Alvarez frowned. He took the sealed envelope from the clerk. He opened it. The room was silent. I could hear the hum of the HVAC system. I watched my father's neck turn a dark, angry red. The judge read the document. He read it again. Then he looked up at Sterling over the rim of his glasses. This appears to be an assignment of interest involving a third party. The judge said, It is. Sterling said, But if this property is subject to a third-party option, Judge Alvarez said, cutting him off, then the timeline of this eviction is indeed suspect. The judge dropped the document back onto his desk. I am ordering Exhibit C to be unsealed for the defense counsel only. The judge ruled, Ms. Mercer is to be given a copy immediately, and I am setting a strict timeline. Mr. Sterling, you will produce the original wet ink bridge agreement for forensic analysis within 3 days. No copies. The original. But, Your Honor, Sterling started. 3 days. The judge barked. And the stay of eviction remains in place until the forensic report is returned. If I find out this court is being used to facilitate a fraudulent transfer, there will be sanctions. Do I make myself clear? Crystal. Your Honor. The gavel banged. I let out a breath. We had won a few days, but as I gathered my purse, I saw my father lean over and whisper something violently to Sterling. My mother looked like she was going to faint. I walked out of the courtroom, Dana leading the way. I need to file the request for the exhibit copy with the clerk. Dana said, Go wait for me near the exit. Do not engage with them. I walked down the hallway toward the heavy glass doors. I needed fresh air. I needed to get away from the smell of my parents' perfume. Caroline, the voice was soft, trembling. I stopped. I didn't want to turn around, but my feet stopped moving. I turned. My mother was standing near the entrance to the women's restroom. She looked terrifyingly old. The studio lights of the courtroom had been unkind to her. In the natural light of the hallway, she looked gray. Mom, I said, I am not supposed to talk to you. Please, she whispered. She reached out a hand, then pulled it back. Caroline, you have to stop this. You do not know what you are doing. I am defending my home. I said, You are destroying us, she said. Her eyes filled with tears. Not the manipulative tears of the sunroom, but real, terrified tears. Mark, your father. He made a promise, a contract. If we do not deliver the title by the end of the month, the penalties. Caroline, they are ruinous. What kind of penalties? I asked. We will lose the house in Winding Brook, she said. We will lose the pension. Everything. He pledged it all. I stared at her. I felt a wave of nausea. You pledged my house, I said. You gambled with my life to cover your own bad investments. It was supposed to be temporary, she hissed. Looking around to see if anyone was listening. Just a bridge loan until the development deal in Florida paid out. But the deal stalled. And now that man, Kessler, he is not reasonable. Caroline, he is scary. So you decided to scare me instead? I asked. You sent a sheriff to my door to save yourselves from him? We thought you would just sign, Elaine cried softly. We thought if we made it look official, you would just sign the settlement and we could work it out later. We never wanted to hurt you. We just needed the deed for a few months. I looked at my mother. I saw the fear in her eyes, but I also saw the narcissism. Even now, facing ruin, she thought her need for safety outweighed my right to exist. "You are not scared for me," I said. "You are scared for you. Caroline, please, if you don't drop the forgery claim, if they investigate, your father has a heart condition." I stepped back. The hook again. The guilt. "I cannot help you." "Mom," I said, "you did this. Not me." I turned and walked away. I heard her calling my name. A desperate, thin sound that echoed off the marble walls. I pushed through the doors into the cold sunlight and didn't look back. I drove home in a daze. The adrenaline from the hearing was fading, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. I pulled into my driveway, my sanctuary. I walked to the front door and slid my key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. I frowned. I jiggled the key. It stuck. I pulled it out and looked at the lock mechanism. The metal around the keyhole was scratched. Deep, jagged gouges where someone had tried to force a tool into the cylinder. I froze. I looked around the street. It was empty. The neighborhood was quiet, but the silence felt heavy, pregnant with threat. Someone had tried to break in. Or maybe not break in. Maybe they just wanted me to know they could. I backed away from the door. I got into my car and locked the doors. I called Dana. They tampered with my lock. I said, my voice was high, tight. "Are you safe?" Dana asked instantly. "I am in the car. I didn't go inside." "Call the police." Dana said, "File a report. Right now." "It won't do anything." I said, "They won't find prints. It is not about catching them today." Dana said, "It is about the paper trail. We need to show a pattern of intimidation." "And Caroline?" "Yes." "Get cameras. Today. Put them everywhere." I spent the next 4 hours dealing with a bored patrol officer who took notes and told me it was probably kids, and then with a locksmith who charged me $300 to replace the deadbolt. After he left, I drove to the electronics store and bought a 4-pack of wireless security cameras. I mounted one over the front door, one over the back, and 2 covering the driveway. I synced them to my phone. I sat in my living room that night, the glow of the phone screen illuminating my face. I watched the live feed of my dark driveway. Nothing moved. I jumped at every creak of the house. I slept with a hammer on my nightstand. At 3 a.m, my phone buzzed. Emotion alert. I grabbed the phone. On the screen, in ghostly black and white night vision, I saw a car. A dark sedan. It was idling directly across the street from my house. The headlights were off. It sat there for 10 minutes, just sitting, watching. Then, slowly, it pulled away. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. When the sun came up, I checked the front porch. There was a piece of paper tucked under the new doormat, a standard white printer paper. Folded once, I picked it up with 2 fingers. As if it were radioactive, I opened it. There were no cutout magazine letters. It was typed. "Settle. It is cheaper." No signature. I stared at the words. It is cheaper. Cheaper than what? Cheaper than a lawyer? Cheaper than a broken leg? Cheaper than a funeral? I put the note in a Ziploc bag. I was done being terrified. I was moving into a cold, hard rage. I drove to Dana's office at 8 o'clock. I slapped the bag with the note onto her desk. "They left this," I said. Dana looked at it. She didn't blink. "Okay," she said. "Then let's see what they are so afraid of us finding." She pulled a file from her drawer. I got the sealed exhibit. She said, "The clerk emailed it to me an hour ago. Show me." Dana slid the document across the desk. Assignment of interest and option to purchase. I read it. The legalese was dense, but the meaning was clear. Mark and Elaine Rogers had borrowed $400,000 from KRG Holdings, Graham Kessler's shell company. The interest rate was predatory, but the kicker was the default clause. In the event of default or failure to satisfy the balloon payment by February 1st, the lender, KRG, shall have the immediate option to purchase the collateral properties for a sum of 50% of the assessed tax value. I scanned the list of collateral properties: 12 Sycamore Lane, the Winding Brook House, Unit 404, Ocean View Condos, Sarasota 424 Elm Street, the Rogers Family Trust property. My address. They had bet my house against their debt, and if they missed the deadline, which they had, Kessler had the right to buy my house for half its value, but he couldn't exercise the option if the title wasn't in the trust. That was why they needed the eviction. They needed to clear my title, get the deed recorded in the trust's name, and then hand it over to Kessler to stop him from taking their own house. It is a domino effect, Dana said. They are trying to knock you down to save their own king and queen. I felt a cold clarity. I need to talk to my father. I said, Caroline, Dana warned, I am not going to negotiate. I said, I am going to end it. I did not call. I drove to my parents' house. I pulled into the driveway behind my father's BMW. I marched up the walk. I didn't use my key. I pounded on the door. My father opened it. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot. His silver hair messy. He was wearing a bathrobe at 11 in the morning. Caroline, he said. He sounded defeated. I pushed past him into the foyer. I held up the copy of the option agreement Dana had given me. I saw Exhibit C, Dad. I said, I know about the option. I know you bet my house to save yours. Mark closed the door. He slumped against it. He didn't argue. He didn't bluster. He just slid down until he was sitting on the marble floor of the foyer, his head in his hands. I had never seen my father sit on the floor. I am sorry, he whispered. Sorry? I said. My voice was shaking, not with fear, but with the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. You forged my signature. You hired a criminal to terrorize me. You sent a sheriff to my door. I had no choice, he said. He looked up at me. His face was wet with tears. The banks. They stopped lending to me. Caroline. After the Florida deal went south, my credit was shot. I needed liquidity. Kessler was the only one who would say yes, but he wanted collateral. Hard assets. So you gave him me. I said. I used your name as a placeholder, he pleaded. It was just on paper. It was never supposed to be real. I thought the Florida money would come through in January, and I would pay Kessler off. And you would never know. I was going to tear up the bridge agreement, and when the money didn't come through? Mark wiped his face. He looked pathetic, a small man in a big house he no longer owned. I panicked. He said, Kessler told me he would take this house. He said he would put your mother on the street. I couldn't let that happen. Caroline, I couldn't. So you decided to put me on the street instead? You are young, he cried, as if that explained everything. You are resilient. You always land on your feet. You are the strong one. Caroline, we knew you could handle a setback, but your mother, she would die. She couldn't handle the shame. The words hit me like a physical slap. You always land on your feet. Suddenly, my whole childhood flashed before my eyes. I was the one who drove myself to soccer practice because Mom had a headache. I was the one who filled out my own financial aid forms for college because Dad was too busy with his investments. I was the one who handled the funeral arrangements for Nana because my parents were too distraught. I was the reliable one, the low-maintenance one, the one who didn't need help. And because I didn't need help, they decided I didn't need protection. They saw my competence not as a virtue, but as a resource, a natural resource they could mine. They felt entitled to my stability because they had raised me. I realized then that they didn't love me, not in the way parents are supposed to love a child. They loved what I provided. They loved that I was an asset that never depreciated. I looked at my father sitting on the floor, weeping for himself, and I felt something break inside me. It was the last tether of loyalty. You didn't do this because I'm strong, I said quietly. You did this because you are weak. Mark looked down. You are going to withdraw the lawsuit. I said, Today, I can't, he whispered. Kessler has the papers. If I withdraw, he executes the option on this house immediately. He will take everything. That is not my problem. I said, Caroline, please, he will destroy us. He is already destroying you. Dad, you just haven't admitted it yet. I turned and walked to the door. Wait, Mark called out. What are you going to do? I opened the door. The sun was shining on the manicured lawn. I am going to let you fall. I said. I drove back to Dana's office. I walked in. She was on the phone, but she hung up when she saw my face. You look different. She said. I am different. I said. I sat down. File the counterclaim. Dana leaned back. Are you sure? Once we file for fraud and abuse of process, it becomes public record. The credit bureaus will see it. The banks will see it. The district attorney might see it. I know. I said, your parents will be ruined. Dana said, I just want to make sure you understand. This isn't just winning a lawsuit. This is blowing up their lives. They treated my life like collateral. I said, they assumed I would take the hit, because I always take the hit. And now I am returning the invoice. Dana smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. Okay, she said, let's draft it. We spent the afternoon outlining the counterclaim. Count 1, fraud in the inducement. Count 2, forgery. Count 3, abuse of process. Count 4, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We detailed the text messages, the lock tampering, the threatening note, the notary fraud. It was a manifesto of their betrayal. When we were done, Dana printed it out. It was 20 pages thick. I will file this tomorrow morning. Dana said. I nodded. I stood up to leave. One more thing, Dana said. She handed me a card. The private investigator found Linda Halloway, the notary. Where is she? She is working at a diner in the next county. She is scared. Caroline, if we subpoena her, she will talk. She doesn't want to go to jail for Graham Kessler. Good. I said. I drove home. I parked in my driveway. I looked at the camera mounted above the door. I looked at the new lock. I walked inside and locked the door behind me. I felt a strange, hollow sensation in my chest. It was the absence of hope. I had given up the hope that my parents would ever be the people I wanted them to be. I had given up the fantasy that if I was just good enough, smart enough, successful enough, they would protect me. They wouldn't, but I could protect myself. I went to the kitchen and made a sandwich. I ate it standing up. My phone rang. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father texted, Please, don't do this. I blocked his number. I sat down on the floor of my living room. Surrounded by my renovation tools, I picked up a tile. It was white, clean, unblemished. I was going to finish this house. I was going to finish it for me. And if the walls of my parents' house had to crumble to build mine, then so be it. I went to sleep that night without the hammer. I didn't need it. I was the hammer now. The counterclaim hit Winding Brook like a meteor strike. In a neighborhood where indiscretions were handled with hushed voices behind manicured hedges, a public filing alleging fraud, forgery, an abusive process against Mark and Elaine Rogers was not just gossip, it was a scandal. It was the kind of thing that got you uninvited from the country club and made the neighbors cross the street to avoid saying hello. I heard about it from Tessa. I had stopped answering my mother's calls, and I had blocked my father. But the grapevine was alive and well. You have no idea. Tessa told me over the phone. She sounded almost gleeful, in that way people do when they are witnessing a disaster from a safe distance. I saw Elaine at the grocery store yesterday. She was wearing sunglasses indoors. Mrs. Henderson tried to ask her about the upcoming garden party, and Elaine just burst into tears and left her cart in the middle of the produce aisle. I felt a twinge of guilt, sharp and familiar, but I pushed it down. I did not make them commit fraud. I just turned on the lights. They are saying you have lost your mind. Tessa continued. That is the spin. Mark is telling people you had a breakdown after the divorce and that you are lashing out. He is playing the grieving father, but I do not think people are buying it, not with the police reports about the lock tampering. That got around fast. Let them talk. I said, I do not care about Winding Brook anymore, but I did care. It hurt. It hurt to know that my parents were using my trauma as a shield for their crimes. They were willing to brand me as mentally unstable to protect their social standing. It was a calculation, cold and precise, the legal machinery. However, did not care about social standing. It ground forward. 2 days after we filed the counterclaim, I received a phone call from a number I did not recognize. Ms. Rogers? This is Arthur Sterling, not the attorney. I am the head of internal investigations for Lakeside Title. I pulled my car over to the side of the road. My heart started to thump. I am listening. I said, "We received a subpoena from your attorney, Ms. Mercer, regarding the access logs for your closing file," he said. His voice was dry, clipped. "We take allegations of data insecurity very seriously. I personally reviewed the audit trail, and we found an anomaly." I gripped the steering wheel. "What kind of anomaly?" 3 weeks after your closing, we received an email request for certified copies of your deed and the title policy. The email appeared to come from your personal account. It used your name. It had your signature block. I never sent that. I said, "We know that now." Sterling said, "Upon closer inspection, the domain name was slightly altered. Instead of your provider, it was routed through a spoofing service often used in identity theft. The request asked for the documents to be sent to a physical address." "Which address?" I asked, though I already knew. "A shipping and printing store on Elm Street." Sterling said, "Addressed to you. Care of general delivery. Pack and go. The place with the robo-notary." So someone pretended to be me to get the clean documents. I said, "And then they used those documents to forge the addendum." "That appears to be the case," Sterling said. "We are flagging this file for fraud and notifying the insurance underwriter. We will be cooperating fully with your attorney." "And Ms. Rogers?" "Yes? I am sorry. This should have been caught by our intake team. The email looked very authentic. Whoever did this knew exactly how to format a request so it would slide through without questions." I hung up. It wasn't just my parents. My parents could barely convert a PDF. This was sophisticated. This was tradecraft. I called Dana. "They phished the title company." I said, "That is how they got the deed to attach to the forgery." "I know," Dana said. Her voice was buzzing with energy, and I found the other end of the string. "Remember the sealed exhibit? The option to purchase?" "Yes." I ran a background check on the clerk who processed the sealing order, a guy named Gary Wilson, and I cross-referenced him with everyone at Kessler's firm. And Gary Wilson shares a registered business address for a defunct consulting LLC with a paralegal who works for Kessler. They are not just colleagues. They are partners in a side business. This is a conspiracy. I said, "It is not just a bad loan. It is a ring." "Exactly," Dana said. "And we are going to expose it. But first, we have to get through the mediation." "The judge ordered mediation?" "Standard procedure in family disputes." Dana sighed. "Judge Alvarez wants to see if we can settle this before he unseals the rest of the file. He set it for tomorrow at 10. In the courthouse conference center, I do not want to settle." I said, "We are not going to settle." Dana said, "We are going to use it to get them on the record." The mediation room was beige walls, beige carpet, a long beige table that looked like it had absorbed 1,000 screaming matches. A mediator sat at the head of the table. He was a retired judge, elderly and soft-spoken, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. My parents sat on one side. Mark looked haggard. The confidence was gone, replaced by a jittery, sweaty anxiety. Elaine was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. She refused to look at me. I sat next to Dana. I wore my best suit. I did not look at my feet. I looked straight at them. "Let us begin," the mediator said. "Mr. Rogers, since you initiated the original action, perhaps you would like to start with your proposal." Mark cleared his throat. He shuffled some papers. "We just want to resolve this," he said. His voice was raspy. "We are willing to withdraw the eviction order immediately." "And?" Dana asked. "And?" Mark said, looking at the table. "We propose a restructuring. Caroline signs a promissory note acknowledging the debt to the trust. We add Elaine to the deed as a 50% co-owner for reassurance. In exchange, Caroline stays in the house. We forget all this nastiness. We go back to being a family." I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat. It was a dark, bitter thing. "You want me to acknowledge a debt I do not owe?" I asked. "And give you half my house?" After you tried to throw me on the street? It is for your protection, Mark snapped, his temper flaring. You are clearly not capable of managing these assets alone. Look at this mess. The mess you created, I said. The door to the conference room opened. We all turned. Graham Kessler walked in. He was not named as a party in the lawsuit. He had no legal standing to be there. But he walked in with the casual arrogance of a man who owned the building. He wore a charcoal suit that fit perfectly. He carried nothing. Excuse me, the mediator said. This is a closed session. Mr. Kessler is an interested party. Sterling, my parents' lawyer, said quickly. He holds the lien on the trust's assets. We requested his presence as an observer. The mediator looked at Dana. Dana sat back, crossing her arms. Let him stay. I want him to hear this. Kessler pulled up a chair. He did not sit with my parents. He sat at the end of the table, creating a triangle. He looked at me. His eyes were flat. Dead things. He smiled, and it was the same smile he had given me outside the courthouse. Hello, Caroline, he said. I did not answer. Mr. Kessler, the mediator said. You are here to observe only. Of course, Kessler said. His voice was smooth, like oil. I am just here to help facilitate a resolution. Family disputes are so tragic. They resolve much faster when everyone remembers what they owe. The threat hung in the air. Remember what you owe. He wasn't talking about money. He was talking about fear. He was telling me that he knew where I lived. He knew what I had, and he considered it his. I felt a cold rage spread through my chest. It started in my stomach and moved out to my fingertips. It was clarifying. It burned away the fear. He was so comfortable. He was so sure that I was just a little girl who would be intimidated by a suit and a vague threat. I looked at Dana. She gave me a microscopic nod. Go. I am not signing a promissory note, I said. My voice was steady, and I am not adding anyone to my deed. Caroline, be reasonable. Elaine pleaded. She sounded desperate. This is a good offer. It saves the house. It saves your house, I said. Not mine. I turned to Kessler. And you? I said, you think you can walk in here and intimidate me? You think because you bought my parents you can buy me? Kessler chuckled. It was a dry, patronizing sound. I have not bought anyone. Ms. Rogers, I am a lender. I provide liquidity to families in need. Your father came to me. I simply expect him to honor his contracts. His contracts are based on fraud. Dana cut in. She opened her file. She pulled out a stack of photos. She slid them across the table toward Kessler. This is a forensic analysis of the signature on the bridge agreement. Dana said, it is a forgery. She slid another paper. This is a sworn affidavit from a former employee of Pack and Go, confirming that your associate brought stacks of documents to be notarized without signers present. She slid a third paper. This is the internal audit from Lakeside Title, showing that an IP address associated with your firm's server farm requested the digital copies of Caroline's deed using a spoofed email. And this, Dana said, slapping the final document down, is the option to purchase agreement you tried to seal, the one that lists Caroline's home as collateral for a loan she never signed. The silence in the room was absolute. Kessler looked at the documents. He did not touch them. His smile tightened at the corners. The mask slipped, just for a fraction of a second, revealing something reptilian underneath. You have a vivid imagination. Ms. Mercer, Kessler said, these are procedural irregularities at best. They are felonies, Dana said, racketeering, wire fraud, bank fraud, and we are submitting all of it to the district attorney this afternoon if this case is not dismissed with prejudice and my client's title cleared. Kessler looked at Mark. The look was terrifying. It was the look a man gives a tool that has broken in his hand. Mark shrank into his chair. He looked small. He looked like he was disintegrating. Elaine made a sound. It was a high, keen whimper. Stop it, she cried. Stop it, all of you. She looked at me. Her face was wet with tears. We had to do it. Caroline, we had to. Why? I asked. I leaned across the table. Why did you have to steal my house? Why couldn't you just ask me for help? Why did you try to destroy me? Because asking wouldn't have worked, Elaine screamed. The room went dead silent. What? I whispered. Mark tried to hush her, grabbing her arm. Elaine, don't. She shook him off. We were drowning, she sobbed. Mark. He invested everything in that development in Tampa. All of it. The retirement, the equity line. He thought it was a sure thing, but the developer vanished. We lost it all. 2 years ago. 2 years? I said. You have been broke for 2 years? We refinanced the house. Elaine said. We borrowed from friends. We maxed out the credit cards. We were robbing Peter to pay Paul. And then we ran out of Peters. She gestured to Kessler. Mr. Kessler was the only one who would lend to us. But the terms. Oh, God. The terms. The interest payments alone were $5,000 a month. We couldn't keep up. So you offered him my house. I said. We begged him for more time. Elaine said, Mark told him we had a family asset we could leverage. We thought if we could just get the title into the trust, we could use it to satisfy the arrears, just for a few months, until Mark's consulting contract came through. But why the eviction? I asked. Why the sheriff at 6 a.m? Why didn't you just call me and say, Caroline, we are in trouble. Please help us. Elaine looked down at her hands. Her diamonds were fake, I realized. They must be cubic zirconia. She had probably sold the real ones months ago. She took a ragged breath. Because you would have asked questions, she whispered. I stared at her. If we asked you for money, you would have wanted to see the books. She said, you would have seen how bad it was. You would have seen that we were ruined. You would have looked at us with that pity, that judgment. So you sued me instead? Mark told me it was the only way, she said. He said if we shocked you, if we hit you hard and fast, you would be too scared to fight. He said if we humiliated you with the eviction, you would just want it to be over. You would sign anything to make it go away. It was... She looked up at me, her eyes pleading for understanding. It was strategic. She said, the word hung in the air. Strategic. They had sat at their kitchen table, drinking tea, and strategized how to traumatize me efficiently. They had calculated that my fear of public shame was greater than my financial sense. They had weaponized my dignity. They didn't just betray me because they were desperate. They betrayed me because they thought I was weak, and they thought I was weak because they had spent 30 years training me to be the good girl who never made a scene. I looked at Kessler. He was watching this family disintegration with mild interest, like he was watching a mediocre play. I looked at my father. He was staring at the table. A coward to the end. I stood up. I am done. I said, Caroline. Wait, Mark said. No. I said, I am not signing anything. I am not settling. I looked at Kessler. And you. I said, you can take their house. You can take their condo. You can take their furniture. But you are not touching my home. I walked to the door. Ms. Rogers, Kessler said. His voice was soft, but it carried across the room. I stopped. You are playing a dangerous game, he said. You are assuming the law will protect you, but the law is slow, and accidents happen very quickly. Is that a threat? Dana asked. Standing up, it is an observation. Kessler said. I turned and looked at him. Get out of my life, I said. I walked out. I walked out of the conference room, out of the courthouse, and into the parking lot. I felt lightheaded. I drove home. I didn't cry. I felt stripped clean. The mystery was gone. There was no misunderstanding. There was no mistake. It was just greed and pride, masquerading as family. When I got to my house, the sun was setting. The shadows were long and purple. I walked up the porch steps. There was an envelope taped to my front door. It was bright orange. Final notice. My heart skipped a beat. Had the judge lifted the stay? Had I missed a ruling? I ripped it off the door. It looked official. It had the county seal at the top. Writ of immediate removal. The occupant is hereby ordered to vacate the premises by midnight tonight. Failure to comply will result in forcible removal by private security contractors. Private security contractors. I looked closer. The seal was slightly pixelated. The font was wrong. There was no judge's signature. It was fake. It was a prop. Designed to panic me, designed to make me pack my bag and run so they could change the locks before the court opened tomorrow. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of it. I sent it to Dana. Her reply was instant. Call me. I picked up the phone. It is fake. Dana said, but it is an escalation. They are desperate. Caroline, Kessler knows we have him on the fraud. He is trying to scare you out before the hearing tomorrow. What do I do? You should leave, Dana said. Go to a hotel. Go to Maya's. Do not stay there tonight. If he sends contractors, it could get ugly. I looked at the orange paper in my hand. I crumpled it into a ball. No, I said. Caroline, be smart. I am being smart. I said, if I leave, they win. If I leave, I am admitting that this isn't my house. It is dangerous. I have new locks. I said, I have cameras. And I'm calling the police to request a patrol. Dana hesitated. Okay, but keep your phone in your hand. And if you hear anything at all, you call 911. I will. I hung up. I walked inside and locked the door. I engaged the deadbolt. I wedged a chair under the knob. I walked through the house. I turned on every single light. The kitchen, the living room, the bedrooms, the porch. I wanted the house to blaze like a lighthouse. I sat down in the middle of the living room floor. Around me were the remnants of my renovation, a stack of subway tiles, a bucket of grout, a pile of unpainted trim. I picked up a piece of sandpaper. I started sanding the trim. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The sound was rhythmic, soothing. I thought about the word home for 33 years. I thought home meant safety. I thought it meant the place where people loved you. I thought it was something you were given, but I was wrong. Home wasn't a gift. It was a territory. It was the space you carved out for yourself in a hostile world. It was the place where you set the rules. My parents had tried to annex my territory. They had tried to colonize my life because they had squandered their own. They thought they had the right because they had created me. But they didn't own me. I looked at the orange paper ball on the floor. Forcible removal. Let them come. I thought. I wasn't fighting for the equity anymore. I wasn't fighting for the credit score. I was fighting for the right to exist without being claimed. I was fighting for the right to be Caroline Rogers, a woman who belonged to herself. I sanded the wood until my hands ached. I sanded until the dust covered my arms like white powder. Outside, the wind howled. A car drove by slowly. I watched it on the camera monitor. It paused, then kept going. I didn't move. I sat in my fortress of light, holding my sandpaper like a weapon, waiting for the dawn. Tomorrow was the final hearing. Tomorrow, I would look my father in the eye and tell the truth. But tonight, I was just holding the line. I was not moving. I was not leaving. I was home. The morning of the final hearing, the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with a rain that refused to fall. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my hallway, smoothing the lapels of my navy suit. I looked different than the woman who had opened the door to Deputy Bryce 5 days ago. That woman had been soft, unfinished, like the drywall in my guest room. The woman in the mirror was sanded down to the grain. She was harder. She was defined. I drove to the courthouse in silence. I did not listen to the radio. I did not call anyone. I needed the quiet to hold my thoughts in formation. When I walked into the lobby, the air smelled of floor wax and damp wool. I saw them immediately. Mark and Elaine Rogers were standing near the security checkpoint. They were dressed for a performance. My father wore his navy blazer with the gold buttons, a silk tie knotted with precision, and gray slacks that held a perfect crease. My mother wore a cream-colored suit and her good pearls, her hair sprayed into an immobile helmet of blonde perfection. They looked like they were attending a charity luncheon at the country club, or perhaps a board meeting for a foundation they did not own. They looked respectable. They looked safe. For a second, just a heartbeat. I felt the old reflex, the urge to shrink, the urge to smooth things over, to fix the tension, to apologize for being the cause of their discomfort. It was a muscle memory honed over 33 years of being the good daughter. Then I remembered the note under my doormat. Settle. It is cheaper. I remembered the camera footage of the idling car. I remembered Mark's admission that he used my name because he knew I would land on my feet. I walked past them. I did not nod. I did not make eye contact. I put my purse on the conveyor belt and walked through the metal detector. "Caroline," my mother whispered as I passed. It was a hiss of steam escaping a pressure cooker. I kept walking. Dana was waiting for me outside courtroom 4B. She looked tired, but her eyes were bright. She was holding a thick file. "Ready?" she asked. "Burn it down," I said. We walked in. The courtroom was fuller than the last time. Graham Kessler was there, sitting in the back row, scrolling on his phone. He looked bored. His attorney, Mr. Sterling, was at the plaintiff's table, arranging papers with fussy, jerky movements. My parents walked in behind us. They sat next to Sterling. They did not look at the gallery. They stared straight ahead at the seal of the county mounted on the wall behind the judge's bench. "All rise." Judge Alvarez swept in. He looked like a man who had not had his coffee. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the attorneys. "We are here on the matter of the Rogers Family Trust versus Rogers," he said, "and the defendant's counterclaim for fraud and abuse of process. I have reviewed the filings. Mr. Sterling, you are moving for immediate possession based on a breach of the bridge agreement. Mrs. Mercer, you are arguing that the agreement is void ab initio due to forgery. That is correct." "Your Honor," Dana said. "Call your first witness," Judge Alvarez said. Dana stood up. "We call Dr. Aris Thorne, forensic document examiner." A small man with thick glasses took the stand. He walked us through the science of the signature. He put images up on the monitor, blown-up scans of the signature on the loan agreement next to 10 samples of my actual signature from checks and tax returns. "As you can see, Your Honor, Doctor," Thorne said, pointing a laser at the screen. "The pressure points on the questioned document are uniform. When a person signs their name, there are variations in speed, fast on the loops, slow on the turns. This signature has a constant line width. It suggests a tracing or a digital paste. Furthermore, there is a pixelation halo around the signature that does not match the resolution of the surrounding text." Sterling tried to cross-examine, asking if stress could alter a signature. "Stress causes tremors." "Doctor," Thorne said flatly, "it does not cause a signature to become a low-resolution JPEG." Next, Dana called the records custodian from Alder Creek Logistics. He confirmed that on August 15th, the date the agreement was allegedly signed in person at my parents' home, I was clocked in at the warehouse from 7 in the morning until 6 in the evening. I had signed 3 shipping manifests that day. The signatures on those manifests matched my known samples. They did not match the bridge agreement. My parents sat like statues. Mark was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. Elaine was shredding a tissue in her lap, turning it into white confetti. Then came the pivot. "Your Honor," Dana said, "the defense moves to discuss the unsealed exhibit, previously marked as Exhibit C." "Proceed," the judge said. Dana picked up the document, the option to purchase. "This document," she said, her voice echoing in the quiet room, "outlines a private loan between Mark and Elaine Rogers and KRG Holdings, a company owned by Mr. Graham Kessler. It lists 3 properties as collateral. One of those properties is 424 Elm Street, the home of Caroline Rogers." She turned to the gallery and looked at Kessler. He didn't blink. "The agreement states that if the loan is not repaid by February 1st, KRG Holdings has the option to purchase the collateral properties for 50 cents on the dollar. This creates a direct financial incentive for the plaintiffs to transfer the title of Caroline's home into their name before the deadline." She turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, this was not a loan dispute. This was a liquidation strategy. The eviction was the mechanism to seize the asset so it could be handed over to a third-party lender to satisfy a personal debt of the parents." Sterling stood up. "Objection, Your Honor." This is speculative. The Rogers Family Trust has every right to manage its portfolio. Judge Alvarez lowered his glasses. Mr. Sterling, I am looking at a document that lists the defendant's home as a target asset. That is not portfolio management. That sounds like a hit list. I want to hear from the plaintiff. Mr. Rogers, take the stand. My father stood up. He looked unsteady. He walked to the witness box as if he were walking to the gallows. He swore to tell the truth. Mr. Rogers, the judge said, did you forge your daughter's signature? Mark licked his lips. He looked at Sterling. Sterling stared at the table. He looked at Elaine. She was weeping silently. I facilitated the paperwork, Mark said. His voice was a whisper. Did your daughter sign it? The judge asked. No, Mark said. A gasp went through the courtroom. It was me. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath. Why? The judge asked. Why did you file an eviction action against your own child? Why send a sheriff to her door? Why not just ask her for the deed? Mark looked at me then. For the first time all day, he met my eyes. I saw the ruin in them. I saw the fear that had been eating him alive for 2 years. We were out of time. Mark said, his voice cracked. The loan was due. Mr. Kessler, he was calling every day. He said he would take our house. He said he would ruin my credit. I knew Caroline would ask questions. She is very detailed. She would have wanted to see the financials. She would have seen that we were insolvent. So you sued her? The judge pressed. I thought. Mark paused. He took a shuddering breath. I thought if we scared her, she would move faster. I thought if she saw the eviction notice, she would panic and sign the settlement just to make it stop. It was supposed to be a pressure tactic. I never wanted to throw her out. I just wanted her to sign over the title so I could give it to Kessler, because you believed she would comply if she was frightened, the judge summarized. Yes, Mark whispered, and you were willing to destroy her credit and her public reputation to save your own? I thought she could handle it. Mark said, it was the same excuse he had given me in the foyer. She is young. She can rebuild. I do not have time to rebuild. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It wasn't sadness. It was the cold, hard realization of my value in his eyes. I was spare parts. I was an engine he could strip to keep his own car running. Mark stepped down. He collapsed into his chair. Elaine stood up then. She didn't wait to be called. Your Honor, please, she cried out. Sit down, Mrs. Rogers, the bailiff said. She ignored him. We were desperate. You do not know what it is like to lose everything at our age. We worked for 40 years. We just wanted to hold on. We did not do this out of malice. We did it out of fear. I looked at my mother. I saw the terror in her eyes, the terror of being poor, the terror of being ordinary. I listened to my heart pounding in my ears. I realized something profound. I could acknowledge their fear. I could see that they were terrified, drowning people, but I did not have to accept their theft. Their fear did not give them the right to cannibalize my life. Understanding them did not mean forgiving them. Elaine sat down, sobbing into her hands. Dana stood up. We have one more witness. Your Honor. The judge looked surprised. Call him. We call Gary Wilson. The back doors opened. The clerk I had seen in the plaza walked in. He was sweating profusely. He was accompanied by a lawyer I didn't recognize. He took the stand. He looked like he was about to vomit. Mr. Wilson, Dana said, you are a deputy clerk in the civil division? Yes, Wilson mumbled. And you processed the filing for Rogers Trust versus Rogers? Yes. And you processed the motion to seal Exhibit C? Yes. Did anyone ask you to expedite those filings? Wilson looked at his lawyer. The lawyer nodded. Yes. Wilson said, Who? I have a consulting arrangement, Wilson said, with a paralegal at KRG Holdings. And what does that arrangement entail? Wilson wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. I review filings for potential investment opportunities. And sometimes I ensure that certain possession orders are moved to the top of the stack. And were you paid for this? Yes. How much? $500 per file. The courtroom shifted. The energy changed from a sad family drama to something sharp and criminal. "And did you speak to Graham Kessler about this specific file?" Wilson hesitated. He looked at the back of the room where Kessler was sitting. Kessler was not smiling anymore. His face was a mask of stone. "Yes," Wilson said. "He met me outside. He told me the Rogers file was a priority. He said the assets needed to be cleared by the 3rd. "Thank you," Dana said. Judge Alvarez looked at the gallery. He looked at Kessler. "Bailiff," the judge said, "ensure Mr. Kessler does not leave the building." Kessler stood up. "This is absurd," he said. "Sit down, sir," the bailiff barked. Judge Alvarez turned back to the room. He looked at my parents. He looked at me. "I have heard enough," the judge said. He closed the file. The sound was like a gunshot. "This court finds that the plaintiff, the Rogers Family Trust, has engaged in a pattern of fraud, forgery, and abuse of the judicial process. The signature on the bridge agreement is a proven forgery. The underlying claim for possession is meritless." The judge leaned forward. "I am dismissing the eviction action with prejudice. That means you cannot file it again. I am confirming Caroline Rogers as the sole and rightful owner of the property at 424 Elm Street." He turned to Mark and Elaine. "Mr. and Mrs. Rogers, your conduct in this courtroom is shameful. You used this court as a weapon to extort your daughter. You falsified evidence. You perjured yourselves." He turned to the court reporter. "I am referring the transcript of these proceedings, specifically the testimony regarding the forgery and the conduct of Mr. Wilson and Mr. Kessler, to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into criminal fraud, bribery, and racketeering." Mark's face went gray. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Elaine let out a low moan and slumped against him. It was over. The gavel banged. The courtroom erupted into noise. The bailiff moved toward Wilson. Sterling was frantically packing his briefcase, trying to distance himself from his clients. I sat still. I watched my parents. They were not looking at me. They were looking at each other with a look of absolute horror. The mask was gone. The charity luncheon costume was just fabric now. They were exposed. They were seen. Dana touched my hand. "We did it," she said softly. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but steady. We walked out, in the hallway. The air was cooler. People were rushing past, unaware that a family had just detonated in courtroom 4B. "Caroline!" I stopped. I turned. Elaine was coming down the hall. Mark was behind her, walking like an old man. Elaine grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, claw-like. "You have ruined us," she hissed. Her eyes were wild. "The DA? Criminal fraud? Do you know what you have done? They will take everything. They will put your father in jail." I looked at her hand on my arm. I looked at her face. I gently reached down and peeled her fingers off my sleeve. One by one. "I did not ruin you," I said. My voice was calm. It was the calmest I had ever been. "You ruined you," I said. "You spent money you didn't have. You lied to people who trusted you, and when you got caught, you tried to sacrifice me to save yourselves. Caroline, we are your parents," Mark choked out. "Then you should have protected me," I said, "instead of selling me." I stepped back. "I stopped letting you use me." I said, "That is the only thing I did." I turned and walked away. I heard them calling my name, but the sound was fading. It sounded like a ghost story. It sounded like the past. Outside on the courthouse steps, the rain had finally started to fall. It was a cold, cleansing drizzle. Dana stood beside me, opening her umbrella. "Listen to me," she said. Her voice was serious. "You won the house. The eviction is dead. But this is going to get messy. I know." I said, "The investigation into Kessler and the clerk, that is going to be big news." Dana said, "Your parents are going to be in the middle of it. The creditors are going to descend on them like vultures. They will lose their house. They might face charges. They will blame you for every bit of it." "I know," I repeated. "And there is still the debt," Dana said. Kessler might try to come after you civilly, claiming unjust enrichment, though he won't win. But you need to watch your credit. You need to stay vigilant. I looked at the city skyline, gray and blurred by the rain. I thought winning would feel like triumph. I thought there would be a moment of pure joy, but there wasn't. There was just relief, and a deep, aching sadness for the little girl who used to wait by the window for her dad to come home. Thinking he was a hero, that fantasy was gone. The fantasy of safety was gone, but in its place was something real. I had a house. It had a mortgage I could pay. It had floors I had sanded. It had walls I had painted. It was mine, and I was mine. I looked at Dana. "Thank you," I said. She nodded. "Go home, Caroline." I walked to my car. I got in and locked the door. I drove through the rain, back to the neighborhood that was not a gated community, back to the street with the mismatched fences and the neighbors who brought lasagna. I pulled into my driveway. I walked up the steps. I looked at the camera. I looked at the new lock. I put my key in the door. It turned smoothly. I walked inside. The house was quiet. The smell of sawdust and lavender greeted me. I took off my suit jacket and hung it on the back of a chair. I kicked off my heels. I stood in the doorway of the living room, looking at the work I still had to do. There was trim to paint. There were tiles to grout. There was a life to build. I was alone, but I was standing on my own floor. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air of my own home. "I am ready," I whispered to the empty room, and for the first time in my life, I meant it. Thank you for listening to this story. This was the story of Caroline Rogers. But I know it is a story that echoes for many of you. We often think of revenge as something loud and violent, but sometimes the greatest revenge is simply refusing to be a victim any longer. It is the act of standing up, locking the door, and saying, "No more." I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to draw a hard boundary to save yourself, even if it meant losing people you were supposed to trust? Please share your thoughts in the comments below in English. I read every single one. And if you want more stories about justice, resilience, and the complicated truth of human relationships, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. Until next time, stay safe and stand your ground.